Hello YouTube, this is Mike, and today we're going to talk about same stuff. I'm going to be asking the question, are codependents narcissists? And then we're going to look at the question, why is codependency not a personality disorder? So, if you're new to this channel, let me give you a heads up on who I am. My name is Mike, and I am a recovering codependent. I was involved romantically with a woman who had a severe case of untreated, undiagnosed borderline personality disorder. And the effects of that relationship were horrific. It was the most condensed, toxic experience of my life, and that's saying a lot. And I have since done some specific work, which you can learn about if you click the join button at the super empath level or above. You can learn what it was that I did to heal myself of that relationship. Now, I am still a recovering codependent, which means that I still have those tendencies within me, and I still do the work on a daily basis to stay out of those kinds of destructive relationships. But most importantly, I'm completely healed from all of the darkness and the pain and the ruminations and all the garbage that's associated. Because my experience was that when I got out of that relationship, that did not stop the pain. It did not stop the craziness, the rumination, the self-doubt, the emptiness, the pain, the confusion, all of that. None of that stopped just because I was out of the relationship. And I've found that I'm not the only one. In fact, I'll probably read a comment or two today which will show you that there are people, once they've been in one of these relationships, a relationship with a borderline or somebody with narcissistic personality disorder, or what they call cluster B personality disorders, that many people never recover. They never bounce back. And so I'm here to tell you that you can completely heal and recover from that. And again, that's what the join button is all about. Of course, subscribe and hit the bell button. But now let's ask the question, is codependency a form of narcissism? So before we answer that question, we first have to rightly identify and define what is codependence. My experience has been that many people respond to the word codependence and don't even know what it means, especially the word dependent. They get that part, and that people really respond to that, and they spend a lot of time talking about, I am not that, I hate that. They'll say things like, I'm not dependent on anybody, I'm very independent, I don't need to be around other people. In fact, I've been alone in a cave in the woods for the past 30 years. I'm definitely not codependent. That's not what the word means. So a codependent is somebody who was raised in a home that had varying levels of dysfunction, which resulted in the person who is codependent having a definition of love that is transactional. So transactional love means that as an infant and as a toddler and as a child, your worth and your value and the rewards that you got, the positive attentions that you got from your parents, was a result of what you did, not who you were. Adults, healthy adults, realize that all relationships are transactional to some degree, but they have a constant relationship with themselves on an internal level, and they are constantly parenting themselves in a positive way. They have a positive, the super ego within them, I guess that's what Freud would call it, is able to give them positive reinforcement, is able to help them incorporate two different emotions at the same time, and to incorporate two different things, two different values in objects, other people. So they have the ability to see other people as simultaneously as good and bad, positive and negative. They have the ability to hold on, I guess it's called object constancy, where they have the ability to keep a constant connection and attachment to somebody else, knowing that they're not perfect. And so they're able to love them with the positive and the negative. And so that is a fully healthy person who is not codependent. A codependent person gets their worth not from inside themselves, but they get it from outside themselves. And in relationships, they seek relationships where they must fulfill some duty. They must do something. They must fulfill a role in order to feel loved. So this is a really fancy way of saying that when you grow up in a dysfunctional home, you're not loved. You're not seen and you're not loved. When you go onto dating apps, you'll see no shortage of people who will say, I just want somebody who loves me for who I am. To which, whenever I see that, I want to respond, well, that was your mom's job, that's not my job. It isn't to say that you don't eventually get to that place where you love somebody for who they are. But a codependent person has a transactional relationship with the world and with the universe. And so they either must be, if they're a codependent, just on the codependent scale, they must be somebody who takes care of somebody else. They make them happy. They're the healer. They're the giver. I'm the one that takes care of all the problems. I'm here for you. So they get their worth by being there for the other person or taking care of the other person's limitations. The borderline has a transactional relationship, and they go back and forth between being the codependent, where they seek to overtly please the other person, or they're demanding that the other person meet their needs. In other words, whether they're either, the love that they give is based on them feeling value based on how the other person views them, or their love is transactional in that your job is to meet my needs. And for the person with narcissistic personality disorder, the transactional relationship is completely one-sided. You are here to meet my needs and to please me and to make me happy. And so no matter where you are on the scale, love is transactional. And so all three of those people are codependents by definition. So if you're sitting here listening to me thinking that there is the abuser and the codependent, no. All three of them are codependents, because all three of them get their value not from who they are internally, but by what they do. Even if they've inverted it and you're forced to do for them, it's, you have to worship them and placate their ego, which is the same thing. That you placate their ego by being the best, the most brilliant, the one with all the power, you're the master, whatever it is. It's a way of saying you're perfect and I reward you for your perfection. So either way, no matter how you look at it, everybody in this category is codependent. I was looking for my 3 types of narcissism page. So you have the codependent, which we look at as the victim, and then on the other end of the scale is the narcissist, who is the abuser. If you want to change the word codependent to empath, feel free, because those words are interchangeable. In fact, I've got on another list of mine, the first list, what is a codependent? The first list is an empath. So if you're saying, I'm not a codependent, I'm an empath, all you're saying is, I'm not a codependent, I'm a codependent. I'm not an empath, I'm an empath. Being an empath is the first requirement. needed to be a codependent. And if you've been with somebody who is a cluster B, you can't also say, well, but I'm not one of those empaths. No, you are. Because remember, the codependent relationship is one of transaction. So if you were the abused one and you were taken advantage of in your mind because of your empathic nature, and somebody used that, that means that your value to them was based on your empathy. So your empathy becomes the transaction, the supply, as you will. So let's get rid of this misunderstanding about what the word codependent means. I mean, we could, I'd be more than happy to change it to transactional lover. Change the word codependent to transactional lover. That would be fine with me. All three of these people suffer from transactional love illness. Now the question is, on the left-hand side, you've got the codependent. And so we're asking the question, can a codependent be a full-blown narcissist? This is what I was saying in some of my other videos. Now be aware, I am consciously challenging your assumptions and your beliefs and your agendas. And sometimes I will consciously go way out on a limb. I will go to extremes specifically to push your buttons and to get you to react within yourself. Now bear in mind, before you write me nasty notes, I don't know you. I can't see your face. I don't know your name. Right now the only thing I'm talking to is a green light and my own face talking back at me on my computer screen. So this isn't about you. Okay? I don't say, when you say this about me, I'm not saying anything about you. I don't even know you. Okay? So if you're getting all bent out of shape over something I'm saying, I can't even see your face. If we were standing next to each other and I was talking to you and I said you, then maybe. But right now, you don't have to buy into anything I'm saying. What I'm hoping will happen is you will take a look at that and apply it to yourself and see what sticks and what doesn't, and what strong reactions you have. If you get angry with me, if you get defensive, that should tell you something. Now, if I came on here and I spoke from my victimhood and I started to talk about what she did to me or what they do, and if I started to cry about it, and then you felt the need to come and take care of me, that would be the opposite. Instead of being angry at me because I said something that pushed your buttons, I would have stimulated your need to project your pain onto me and then try and rush through the screen and take care of me. So this is an opportunity for you to look at your projections. Okay? So was there something else that I wanted to say? I want to say something else very quickly. I won't go too deep into it, but it's one of my favorite subjects. It is having to do with critical thinking. Let me take a sip of my non-alcoholic kombucha ginger beer. Critical thinking does not mean that you magically have this ability to see things without emotion and know the truth. That's not critical thinking. There's no shortage of very non-emotional, very intellectual people who talk about all kinds of science and other things who have zero critical thinking. Critical thinking starts with the ability to know your own emotional reactions to anything anybody says or does. Now, for those of you who have dated borderlines, you know that's a big problem for them. When borderlines are splitting, the thing that makes them a borderline is that they're incapable of knowing the difference between their emotional reactions within themselves and something that's actually happening in physical reality. They can't trust what they see and what they hear. In fact, they change it around. You end up looking at your watch thinking, I can't wait to get home because I want to give my girlfriend her birthday present. And the borderline thinks you're looking at your watch going, holy crap, I can't wait till this dinner is over and I can get rid of this piece of garbage and I'm not going to give her birthday present. And then they act as though their internal reality is real. Zero critical thinking, because they don't have the ability to be aware of their own emotional agendas. So that's the first thing. Whenever, and I'm going to show you here, somebody gets into a very good communication with me, but I'm going to show you where their lack of critical thinking is. That what's really going on is underneath all of this very rational and very good points that they're making. In my belief, based on what I'm looking at, I'm of the opinion that what's happening is that on an unconscious level, they're trying to tell me to stop judging them. Now, they don't have that experience at all. Their experience is that they're having this very interesting conversation with me about this whole idea of codependence and narcissism. So, as I said earlier, when I pointed to here in the beginning, I said I've completely healed myself from that very toxic relationship with my borderline ex, which has been over a year now. I can't believe it. I'm completely healed from that. The way that I healed myself of the relationship, and I'm here to tell you that I'm going to say at least 75% of people that tell me that they're healed, they're not healed. When you're healed from the relationship, no matter how much pain that they brought against you, no matter how much damage they caused you, if you are healed, you have zero anger. Now, that's not the same as denying your anger, which most codependents will do. They will deny their anger because they feel shame, because somebody who's angry over that, and they're really angry at themselves because they let themselves get hoodwinked by somebody. So they feel shame. So they pretend that they're just fine with it. No, I don't care about that. I dated this borderline yesterday, though. So most of the time I run it. They're not over it. When you are healed, you have zero pain. You think back at that person and you can bring to mind the worst, most painful part of the relationship, and you don't have to have any reaction. You can look at it and have compassion for the borderline or the narcissist. If you're healed, it means that you no longer look back with, number one, anger, resentment, or feelings of needing justice. If you have any of those feelings, I'm not judging you. You're not healed yet. That's just a fact of the matter. When you look back on the relationship and you remember the good times, if you look back on the good times with sadness or with longing or a desire to, if I could just have that part of her, you're not healed either. When you're healed, you look back on it without any colored glasses and you go, oh, that whole time that I thought that we were really connecting and we were experiencing each other on a soulmate level, I can see now it was 100% projection. I was totally projecting on them and they were projecting on me, and there wasn't any real love there at all. And you can say that without any shame, without any anger, without any regret. Now, if that doesn't apply to you, then you're not healed. So I'm here to tell you, you can be healed, but you've got to be ruthless and you have to employ critical thinking. First step of critical thinking says that everybody has an emotional agenda 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If they're not conscious of their emotional agenda, then it is happening on an unconscious level. And so the idea is to become conscious of it. We can say that people with personality disorders have little or no conscious awareness of their emotional agendas, which is why they're so dangerous. But you can be really codependent. You can be in a huge amount of pain, and if you have awareness of what your emotional agendas are, then you can actually be somebody that can be safe to be around, because you have the ability to know what is constructive and what is destructive, even though you're aware, God, I really want to steal from that person or take from that person, or I'll use them for this or that, or I'm really angry at them for this reason or that reason. The goal is to become fully conscious of our unconscious. This is true for everybody. If you're a borderline or an NPD and you're in therapy, this is what your therapy is all about, so that you can become fully conscious of your emotional reactions in every moment, your emotional agendas in every moment. And here's the thing, you can have two people who have the exact same emotional agenda, and both people are acting to fulfill their emotional agendas. One will be narcissistic and destructive, and the other one will be loving and constructive. The only difference is when you know what it is, you can consciously present it and give somebody choice. When you're unconscious about it, you will be passive aggressive and controlling and manipulative in order to get what you want. That's the only difference. The only difference is the healthy person says, hey, you may not want to do this, but I'd really like to take you home and have meaningless sex with you tonight. But does that sound like fun? The person who's unconscious will go, you know what, I'm madly in love with you, and I realize you're the one, and I need to go back and do your reading. I need to take a look at your astrology, and you know what, you've got a disc out of place here. I want to take you back to my place, and I'm gonna do some craniosacral work on you so we can get you all. But you're not being honest, and then difference is, you have the same desire, you just have the same motivations. One person is okay with it and is okay with not getting what they want, and they love themselves whether they get it or they don't. The other person is filled with shame and doesn't feel worthy, and so they have to lie and manipulate, and they're not willing to take the chance of not getting what they want because they're afraid they'll never get it again. The only difference is one person's conscious and the other person's not conscious. All right, so I've gone far off the beaten track with that tangent. But the point is, I want to point out to you that I am making the very extreme assertion. I am consciously making it without any vitriol or anger or anything like that. I am making the conscious extreme statement that codependents are in fact narcissists. We can talk about what is the difference between the narcissism of the codependent versus the narcissism of somebody that has a personality disorder. That's a valuable discussion because I think that has some value to it. And I think there is a difference. But as I've made in the past, I'm making the very extreme statement that there's really no difference between the narcissist, the borderline, and the codependent in terms of narcissism and psychopathy. Psychopathy means lack of empathy. And so we're going to talk about that. So let me just go ahead and go straight to the comments. Bear in mind, if you leave a comment on my channel, the whole world can see it. And so I may use it in a video. Now, I am aware that sometimes I consciously go after people in a very aggressive way, trying to mirror back in a harsh way the insanity of their thinking so that, if they don't wake up to it, which they might not, it might actually make them more, entrenched in their defensiveness. I am hoping that the rest of us in the peanut gallery watching can look and see if they can apply it to themselves. This particular interchange is with somebody who I believe is very conscious and seems very aware. They seem to me to be on the path of recovery, whether that's through therapy and or through 12 steps. I don't know. My guess is more therapy than 12 steps, but it could be both. And before I go any further, the three most important things you need in order to achieve what I've achieved, which is the healing of the relationship, you need three things. You need therapy, and you need to go and work the 12 steps. I don't care which 12-step group it is. Alcoholics Anonymous, Codependents Anonymous, Adult Children of Alcoholics, I could care less. But you have to work the 12 steps. The easiest one is CODA, CODA.org. And then the third thing is daily meditation. What that will give you, among other things, is it will give you critical thinking skills. The ability to know what your emotional agendas are and to, without judgment or shame, acknowledge it and see it for what it is, and then take constructive action. And that's really the only thing that separates an unhealthy or a destructive person from a destructive versus a constructive person, is the consciousness of their agendas. It's that simple. It's a simple thing, but it's not easy to do. And anyway, I won't get into all of that. I'm already going off on too many tangents. So this was in response to my video. 3 Types of Narcissists, Part 2. And I can't remember everything I said in that, but I'm quite sure that I made the statement that codependents are not victims, they themselves are inverted narcissists. I mentioned in probably that video, if not another one, that I got this from Sam Vaknin. If you're familiar with him, he's very, very influential in this whole scenario of narcissism. And he identifies a form of narcissist, like somebody who has full-blown NPD, as being the inverted narcissist. The inverted narcissist is the professional victim. The inverted narcissist is somebody who interacts with narcissists exclusively, seeks out narcissists and chooses to be their victim, chooses to be their supply. They complain all the time. They see themselves as victims of everything. Everything and everybody has victimized them. And they seek to become indispensable to the narcissist by meeting their narcissistic need for worship and for supply. And they make themselves doormats. They'll seek out abusive, master-slave type of relationships, for example, so that they can be so subservient and be so victimized, and give the narcissist whatever evil pleasure they get from their narcissism. And they do that because they themselves are narcissists. And their narcissism comes from being the perfect servant, slave, victim. These are the people who go on to make these, if you go on to YouTube, you see no shortage of channels, people, some of them in the healthcare field, who make these videos about how the super empath destroys the narcissist, and the one thing the narcissist can't survive, and how to, that the super empath is so superior. I mean, this is what you're hearing is the communication of an inverted narcissist, of a covert narcissist. Covert does not mean the narcissist who's hiding and pretending to be something they're not. It means that their initial interface is to be empathic and giving, and then underneath that is a psychopath who has no empathy. The borderline is a good example because the borderline does that. When the borderline is love bombing you, they are consciously full of love. When they get too close to you, they flip out, and out of fear, they destroy the relationship and they lose all their empathy. And as you know, if you've been on the other end, they become extreme narcissists. They become hardcore psychopaths. So that's what a covert narcissist is. And borderlines are a form of covert narcissism. Doesn't mean they're pretending to be something they're not. I'm evil, but I'm pretending to be nice. It means that I interface and I'm nice, and then when I'm not nice, I have no empathy whatsoever. I'm not constant. So I'm here to say that the codependent, whether or not they are full-blown narcissistic personality disorder, covert narcissist, inverted narcissist, or not, they share the same kind of narcissism. And I talked about how the codependent, because all 3 of these are codependents, remember, all 3 of these, and these aren't the only codependents out there, but these are 3 of them. You have the codependent, whom we are identifying as the victim in this relationship. There is the borderline and the narcissist, and all 3 of them operate from transactional love, meaning they do not allow themselves to be loved for who they are, nor do they love the other person for who they are. The codependent's transactional love is as the servant, the parent, the healer. And so their job within themselves is to be the perfect servant, healer, parent for the abused, broken child. That is their projection. They project their broken child essence within them. They project it onto the borderline or the narcissist. I'm here to help you. I'm here to fix you. It is their inverted narcissism. Listen to me now if you're a codependent. Excuse me. It is your inverted narcissism that triggers you to stay. So, when you've got the cognitive dissonance where you're being taken advantage of, but you can't leave, and you can't shake the feeling of, I have to fix them, I have to heal them. If I can just get them to know that they're loved, it'll all be okay. That's your inverted narcissism. You don't feel that way, because when I say the word narcissist, you think somebody who is sitting there twirling their mustache, loving the idea of hating you. You think that's what a narcissist is. No, a narcissist is somebody who does not have empathy. A narcissist is somebody who is completely projecting all the time on the person that they're with and only interacts through transactional love. So your inverted narcissism is you're seeking out a victim because you see the borderline. That's my drug of choice is borderlines. You see the borderline as this damaged infant that needs to be healed. And you can feel the broken infant screaming that is on the verge of dying because of the lack of love that they don't experience. And you can't help but respond to that. And so your perfection is you're going to be the one who will finally tolerate all of their infantile rage and abuse. And you will be able to, like a storm, you'll be able to walk through the storm of their rage and abuse and finally touch them in their deepest heart of hearts and fill them with love. You are not going to let their rage and abuse take your love away for them. They will feel your love, and then they will stop, and the rage and the storm will finally cease, and they will see you as their savior. So your narcissism is to be seen as the savior, the perfect angel, the Messiah, the Christ on the cross who deals with all of the sin of the world, and because of that, everybody loves him and worships him. That's your narcissism. You get a narcissistic supply. Listen to me now. You get your narcissistic supply when you indulge in all of the intense feeling of love that you have for the broken borderline or narcissist. Because the borderline or the narcissist is incapable of returning your love, you then never have to be held responsible for all of the infinite love you are giving. That's your inability to connect. That is your inability to attach. Your inability to attach is fully expressed only with the borderline or the narcissist because they are narcissists who cannot love you back. They cannot return your love. If they do return your love, it's only because they're going to later pull the rug out from underneath you. And you know this, so you allow yourself to fully, totally give yourself. And so there's your inverted narcissism again. The need to be this is why I make fun of the super empath with the cape flapping in the wind. But you see yourself as superior to the borderline or the narcissist because in your perfect spiritual empathic love, you see how broken they are, and you are going to come fully like God and touch them and heal them. All right? So that was what I was saying in more than a nutshell, in multiple nutshells. That's what I was saying. So this person responds and says, because I said, I disagree with Sam Vaknin, who talks about the inverted narcissist as being somebody who has NPD, and they act like codependents. And at some point he said, that doesn't mean, and I don't know if these were connected in the same thought or not, but at some other point he said, just because you are living with a narcissist does not mean that you are an inverted narcissist or a covert narcissist. And I remember hearing that, and I didn't agree with it. And I didn't have my intuition, which may or may not be right, but my intuition said he's guessing. Because he identifies, I'm assuming, I could be wrong, he identifies as a narcissist, and he sees the codependent as something other than the narcissist. But he can see the narcissist in the covert narcissist professional victim. And so he makes a distinction. And he says, just because you're with a narcissist doesn't mean you're a covert narcissist. And I, as I said, my first thought was, this is the first time I've heard him where I don't think he really believes that, or I'm not really believing it. And I think it's because in his experience, he experienced himself as a narcissist. He sees the codependent as outside of him. I don't. Because of the work that I've done, I don't see myself any different from the narcissist or the borderline, even though I'm not a borderline or an NPD. I'm a codependent. But I can tell you from my experience, everything that I shared with you about what the incredible narcissism of the codependent is because I've been there. And after I've done the work, I'm looking at, that's why I can look back on my now borderline X, and even during the love bombing phase where everything was perfect, I can look back on it and go, no, I was totally projecting out of my narcissism. It wasn't real love, because I've had real love. And I know the difference. Now, some of you watching, you don't know. That's not a judgment, but some of you have been codependent your whole life, and you don't know. You don't know what real love is. So you've gone from one transactional love relationship to another. And so this is why, again, those three things are the most important thing. And everything in you will fight to keep you from going through that process of self-analysis. Because nobody likes to see that. It wasn't fun for me to see, oh my God, I am so narcissistic. My love, my need to heal and fix the broken kitten is totally my narcissism. And it's a way of me avoiding any real responsibility for my love. Because when somebody loves you back, guess what? You're now responsible. You know that. You've been on the end where you've thrown your love on the borderline, and the borderline or the narcissist has either not responded or rejected your love. And so you know what that's like when somebody doesn't take the responsibility to love you back. But you haven't ever been on the side where somebody loves you and you're like, oh my God, now I'm responsible. I'm now responsible for their being on a certain level. That's why you choose the borderline and the narcissist, so that you never have to be responsible. Because you know they're going to leave you. If you don't know it consciously, you know it intuitively and on an unconscious level. All right, so let me get to the comment here. So the person says, I think Sam Vaknin explained that there is one type of codependent that he alone defines as an inverted narcissist. I guess what he's saying is that this guy is saying that only Sam Vaknin defines that type of codependent as an inverted narcissist. Although he, I guess he means Sam Vaknin, doesn't officially recognize codependency as an established personality disorder because it's not listed within the DSM-5. He doesn't believe that all codependents are narcissists as far as I'm aware. Now, I think he's going to introduce an assumption. So right now he's talking about what Sam Vaknin says, and it's neutral because neither of us are saying this is true or that. This is what somebody says. I think he's going to change his tone here for a moment. He's going to say dependency personality disorders are within the cluster C category. Okay, so that's a personality disorder, dependency. All right, so now we're getting out of my wheelhouse. I'll have to go research that. And then he goes on, he says he gives another assumption here. Codependents are not considered pathological in any of the key defining personality traits, which gives them better prospects of recovery. All right, so I am in agreement with that. I do agree, and I have said that the codependents that are not full-blown NPDs or borderlines, those codependents do have the ability to recover because they have a measure of self-awareness. They also have a measure of object constancy that cluster B personality disorders do not have. That's why it's a personality disorder. So I'm in agreement with that. Codependents are not considered pathological in any of the key defining personality traits, which gives them better prospects of recovery. Now he's talking about me. He says, by claiming that codependents are narcissists, you're taking it upon yourself to place codependency within the cluster B category. That would be a little controversial. Now, in all fairness, I didn't read his whole comment when I responded. I was responding to something about what Sam Vaknin said. Anyway, I do that a lot. I say, Andy, I know. That's why I said I disagree with him. Perhaps it's because he doesn't personally identify as a codependent. And then I said, I don't think all codependents are diagnosable as people with narcissistic personality disorder, but I do think that codependence is stimulated by more than normal levels of narcissism. And to his response, he says, yes, codependency is a really complicated subject where nobody is an expert. So I guess everyone has a right to put their own spin on interpreting it, especially those of us who are codependents or recovering codependents. The major difference between codependents and cluster Bs is that codependents are fully aware of who they are, but do not understand why they're so limited. Cluster Bs don't know who they are. They create and present a fictitious character for the world to accept as real. Now, this is another integral part of sorry, I got distracted. An integral part of critical thinking is understanding that whenever somebody comes to you with a belief, they're going to, at some point, they're going to state their belief as fact. Either they're going to quote the Bible, like if it's a Christian, they're going to say, God loves you and you are separate from God. That's an assumption that they're stating as fact. And if you allow that assumption to go past your critical thinking filter and you let that either consciously or unconsciously go in and become fact, now you are in the wheelhouse of whoever is talking to you. Now, I do this. I just did it. I just did it for, however long I've been on the channel. I do it all the time. I say, borderlines this, codependence this, and I state all these facts out there. Now, I am conscious that I'm doing that. I'm consciously doing that because I'm consciously saying either something that I think is very deep and profound or extreme for the express purpose of getting you out of your assumptions about what you think you are and what you think these relationships are and all that. And it's okay with me if you get upset, if you don't get upset, if it's helpful or hurtful. I'm okay with all of that. But I'm consciously, knowingly throwing these assumptions out. When somebody throws these things out and they're not conscious of it, that's when things get dicey, because then you have difficulty finding common ground and then it becomes a battle. So he's throwing out an assumption. Now he is not saying it, but based on this assumption, he seems to be talking about the literature based on psychology, etc., etc. Now, as you know, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I am not a mental health professional. I am talking mostly from my own experience through my own recovery. When it does line up with psychology, I'm more than happy to use it, and say, here's what Sam Vaknin says or what psychologists say. But I'm also okay in saying, without any knowledge, here's what I think the facts are, here's what I believe. Because for me, what is most important is the practical reality of healing. To be conscious and whole is more important to me than following some, belief system or some psychological tenet of something or other. So, with that having been said, let me once again look at this and see, was there an assumption here? He says the major difference between codependents and cluster Bs, because he earlier said that I am lumping codependents into cluster B personality disorders. That is accurate. I am consciously doing that. But I'm not necessarily saying that there's a clear boundary between cluster B and non-cluster B. Just like within cluster B, there's no clear boundary between borderline and narcissist. You can be, comorbid, borderline narcissist, antisocial personality disorder, histrionic. You can be comorbid a lot of stuff. So if that's true within cluster B, why is it not also true that non-cluster Bs can also merge in with that? So that's the assumption there. He is making the assumption that he's pointing out to me that I'm lumping everybody into these cluster B category, and that could be problematic. And then he makes the statement that codependents aren't cluster Bs, and so you're not making, he's saying that I'm not being consistent or accurate, etc., etc. Now he's doing it in a very logical kind of way, so I'm not fighting with him, but I'm not agreeing with his assumptions. As a critical thinker, I can choose to accept or reject somebody's assumption. The other thing is everybody, myself included, everybody operates from an emotional agenda. What I'm going to make the case here that this very conscious, very cooperative, very polite, very intelligent person that is interacting with me, I'm going to make the case that they are operating from an emotional agenda of, I'm a codependent and I don't like what you're saying about me. Now, that's going to make people want to do things like lay assumptional foundations of there's a difference between a codependent and a cluster B. You can't say they're both the same thing. And that's what you're saying. So that's going to be a good argument if your emotional agenda is, hey, I'm a codependent and I don't want to be lumped together with cluster Bs. Now, I don't have an emotional agenda about that. I am more than ready to swim in the pool where borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, non-personality disorder codependents can swim in the same pool, which is what I've been saying. He's pointing that out. You're putting us all in the same pool. I'm saying, yes, that's right. That there are differences. Otherwise, we wouldn't use the term borderline or narcissist. We would just all use one word. No, there's a difference. But I'm totally okay with one person having a, quote, personality disorder and another one not having a personality disorder, and yet all three of them are hardcore narcissists and psychopaths. I'm introducing to you that the idea of being a codependent is, I'm introducing you the idea that codependents are psychopaths, even if they don't have a personality disorder. Maybe their psychopathy isn't permanent, like with the narcissist, for example, they're in a permanent state of psychopathy. Maybe for the codependent it's not permanent, but they do definitely lapse and regress and go into a state of psychopathy. Even when their psychopathy, their expression of their psychopathy is to pour unconditional love onto a broken kitten that can never love them back, as I talked about earlier. All right, so that's an assumption that I don't accept. I'm okay with it. I'm okay if that's true or not true, but I'm not accepting it. In other words, I'm not going to let him take that kind of control over the conversation, which is what happens when you have an emotional agenda. When somebody has an emotional agenda, they're going to want to take over the conversation by throwing out an assumption. And if they can throw out an assumption that you feel forced to accept, then they will have control over the conversation. Christians do this. Born-again Christians do this. They come, if they, they don't do it now because it's lockdown, but, back when they used to come knocking on your door, or they stop you on the street and they have pamphlets and they want to tell you to accept Jesus, they throw assumptions at you. But what they're hoping is that you will unconsciously accept the assumption that the Bible is the Word of God. Now, they might or might not say that. Even if you're an atheist or spiritual but not religious, if you live in the Western world, you grew up with that assumption smashed into you, so that if somebody says, well, in the Bible, God said this, instead of saying, well, but that's just a book, I don't believe any of that. Instead of having that, which is destroying their assumption, which is the same as saying, I don't accept your assumption here, so you're going to have to come from someplace else. But they're hoping that instead of saying, I don't agree that the Bible is the Word of God, they're hoping you're going to say, well, that's not what that means. And then the born-again Christian will have all the power because he knows more about the Bible than you, and he knows all the tricks, and he knows how to interpret it literally, and he knows how to use it against you. And so you'll never win that argument. And eventually you'll end up being, convinced to come to church and get on your knees and accept Jesus as your Savior. And that's because the Christian has an emotional agenda. And their emotional agenda is they believe that God is demanding that they go out and save other people's souls. All right, so I'm saying this person has an emotional agenda and may not be fully aware of it. And I think their emotional agenda is, I don't like what you're saying about me. I'm not a narcissist. So, again, here's his assumption. First, he says, I guess everyone has a right to put their own spin on interpreting, especially those of us who are codependents and recovering codependents. That is a truthful thing, but he's setting it up because he's saying, this is your interpretation, and I guess you have the right to interpret it however you want. But here's the facts of the matter. The major difference between codependents and cluster Bs is that codependents are fully aware of who they are, but do not understand why they're so limited. I do not accept that assumption. That's an assumption, and I don't accept that as fact. In fact, I heartily disagree that codependents are fully aware of who they are. Now, they may have object constancy, which is different. Object constancy says that you're not going to split. You make a decision about your job, you make a decision about your relationship, you make a commitment, you can follow through with it, you can tolerate loving and hating, being happy and having buyer's remorse. I just bought a new surfboard, so I'm going through back and forth feelings of being elated and also buyer's remorse because I have to pay taxes and, all that kind of stuff. So, but because I'm not splitting on my surfboard, at least not yet. I'm keeping my surfboard and I'm tolerating these two different feelings. Borderline can't tolerate it. They have buyer's remorse and they have to return you or they have to discard you. The same with the narcissist, the NPD. They do the same thing. They split in their own way. It's a different, they have some differences about them, but it's basically the same thing. But the idea that a codependent fully knows who they are, I don't accept that at all. The whole idea of the codependent is based on transactional love. You cannot engage in transactional love if you know who you are. If you know who you are, then you know that, wow, this is toxic, this is unfulfilling, this isn't going to work. My whole worth here is what I do for this person, or I've been using this person for my own selfish gains. If you are fully aware of yourself, you don't engage in transactional love. If you are in a romantic relationship with a borderline or a narcissist and you're still there, even though what he's talking about here, he says that when he says that codependents do not understand why they're so limited, and I'm not sure if he means that I don't understand why I, the codependent, am so limited, or I don't understand why the borderline is so limited. Either way, it doesn't matter. I think he means the borderline. that the codependent is fully aware of who they are, but they don't understand why either they're incapable of taking healthy action or whatever. Anyway, point being is that what he's saying is that the codependent has cognitive dissonance. That there's a part of them that knows what they're doing is damaging and hurtful, but they can't stop. They can't stop the impulse. So he's saying they fully know who they are, but they have cognitive dissonance. And I'm saying to have cognitive dissonance means you don't know who you are. And I know for myself in my recovery, I still am becoming aware of who I am. I've just recently become aware of, I had this idea that I needed to show to the world I had value if I had a beautiful wife or a beautiful girlfriend. And I've been single for quite some time now. And I've been walking around, in previous months feeling like, gosh, why am I such a screw up? I'm all alone. Until I realized that I'm actually, if I get beyond that need to be accepted by society, because that's what that is, based on my self-directed self-negativity, my transactional codependent love mind. That's my transactional relationship with society, is that society is going to love me if I do this, if I have a girlfriend, if I have a wife. And I come to realize that I'm really, really enjoying being alone. In fact, if I don't think in that terms, I actually prefer my life exactly as it is. And that was a big revelation to me. So I didn't know. I was not fully aware of who I was. So I disagree. If you're in a relationship with a borderline or a narcissist, you don't know who you are. He goes on to say, talking about cluster Bs don't know who they are. They create and present a fictitious character for the world to accept as real. So do codependents. The whole personality that they present to the world as being, this super empath. Where is the super empath? As Superman flying through the air, saving the little boy, that is the codependent's false identity. Now, we know from narcissists are 100% have a firewall, fake personality of perfection, because on the other side of that firewall is a complete emptiness. There's no personality, there's no self-worth, there's just this black hole of utter, complete, not just self-hatred and shame, but just a complete lack of existence. So they have to have this firewall of perfection that they present to the world, because that's how they believe they need to be, because of their transactional relationship with their abusive parents. They had to create that. And so they have to be perfect. So they're in a continuous transactional relationship with the world, which says, my worth to the world is based on my perfection, which is why they can't tolerate ever being even wrong in the slightest sense. One example is Donald Trump. When Donald Trump mispronounces something, he won't do what many people do. Excuse me, what I meant to say was, and they might even laugh at themselves. Sorry, I rented lips. He can't do that. If he says a word wrong, he persists. He'll repeat it wrong 3, 4, or 5 times in an attempt to say it correctly. I'm trying to think of some of the things that he said, but you know what I'm talking about. The Constitution, really the Constitution, he doesn't stop and say, sorry, the Constitution, he doesn't do that. Because he can't tolerate the thought of being seen as imperfect. You remember Covfefe? You remember with Trump that there was a long time ago, one of his tweets, he wrote Covfefe, and people made fun of that. And instead of saying, oh yeah, I misspelt whatever word he was, collusion or whatever it was, he says, no, it's a secret thing between me and some other people. You wouldn't understand. He can't be imperfect ever. So he has this narcissistic firewall all the time. So I don't agree that codependents don't have a fictitious firewall character. They may be more porous about it than the borderline or the narcissist. But when they are in a relationship with a borderline, with a narcissist, they are fully regressed. They do not have conscious awareness of themselves, because if they did, they would know, not just consciously, but they would know intuitively that I'm not going to get any love from this person. This is not a love relationship. I'm out of here. So if they keep going back in the hope that this time in their narcissism they can fly down from the skies with the giant red E on their chest for super empath, if they're going to fly down and fix the borderline or the narcissist and finally get them to love them back, then they are definitely not in full awareness of themselves. No two ways about it. They may not have some of the dissociative issues that a borderline and a narcissist have, but it does not, I don't accept that at all. They don't know who they are. He may be saying that in a different way. But the other thing he says is that cluster Bs don't know who they are. They create and present a fictitious character for the world to accept as real, because he says earlier that cluster Bs don't know who they are. But as I just got through saying, that codependents definitely present a false persona to the world. I'm thinking of all the codependents that I've known. I'm thinking about myself. I'm trying to think of the codependent who really, honestly, truly knows who they are and presents that truth to the world. They feel so much shame for who they are. Especially the codependent whose worth comes from doing things for other people, being a good person, being loving and kind and caring and empathic and helpful, and I help everybody and everything. That in itself is a false self presented to the world. So he responds to another one of my videos. I'm going back in time now. So he's responding to the first 3 types of narcissists, the first part. He says, "Hi, Mike, another terrific video. One minor point I disagree with is your assumption that codependents and borderlines are narcissists. Even though I understand there are some overlapping personality traits for sure. Codependents do not exhibit the defining narcissistic personality traits. Codependents are not overly self-important, grandiose, exploitative, entitled, and lacking empathy. These characteristics are what place the narcissist within the cluster B category. It would be more correct to say that codependents, narcissists, and borderlines are all codependent." So I am saying that. Borderlines, narcissists, and codependents are all codependent. But again, I don't agree with this assumption. He's stating these assumptions as fact. I'm sure he has plenty of resources behind him to say that, but I don't accept that. I'm okay with not saying that. Now, again, my first question is for this person is, what I would like to know is, do they have a personal emotional agenda in response to me? If they describe themselves as codependent, do they have a reaction to my categorizing codependents as narcissists? Does that bother him? In the beginning, when I said anybody who dates a borderline is a codependent, there were a lot of people that really couldn't tolerate me just saying that. I'm not a codependent. I'm an empath. And then, of course, I did my thing of destroying that argument, in my opinion. So is this another version of the same thing? I'm a codependent. I'm not a narcissist. So according to this, the codependents are not overly self-important, grandiose, exploitative, entitled, and lacking empathy. And I have to completely disagree with that. I've experienced codependents who were all of those things. And I've been all of those things. So codependents are not overly self-important. Are you telling me that the codependent who has fixed themselves to a borderline. And if you know anything about borderline personality disorder, the thing that makes it a personality disorder is that they are incapable of attaching and they are incapable of loving. So if you've been with a borderline, if you listen to my earlier videos, what I tell you is, my opinion, based on my experience and my observation and my communication with borderlines in recovery, is that you're feeling that it's getting better, you're making progress, that the love, you're almost there. If you just this time do it better and get them to feel love, then they'll finally break down, the defenses will drop, and they'll accept you in and they will love you back. And I say that that's actually never going to happen. In fact, if they are a borderline, what you can guarantee will happen is that they will not only keep splitting on you, but each time they split on you, it will be worse than the last. They will demand more and more intimacy from you and more promise of giving back the love. And then when you have given all of the intimacy that you have, there will be nothing left for the borderline to feed on, and the borderline will then go through a final discard. They will split, and that split will be horrific. And if you haven't gotten to the final discard yet, then there's still more meat on your bones. So when they discard you and they discard you permanently, it will be horrific. So if you know that, then you know that the feeling that you're just about to get there, you're almost there, if you can just package your love in the exact right way, they will finally be powerless against it. They will not be able to resist your love, and they will succumb to your love, and then they will love you back forever. And if that isn't self-important and grandiose, I don't know what is. That again is the idea that I had, which if you've been with a borderline, you have, which they give you when they tell you that you're the perfect person, that nobody's ever loved me like you have. What I have with you, I've never had with anybody else. Your grandiose, narcissistic self-importance says, I'm the only one that can ever truly love this person. That's how I know it's my twin flame. That's how I know we're destined for each other. I'm going to swoop in now with my empathic superpowers, and this time it's going to work. That is grandiose, self-important. And it is narcissistic because it comes from that place of transactional love, of perfection, and your narcissism is, I'm the one that has the perfect love, just like Jesus. People who get on their knees and they repent, that's Jesus, doing that. He's God. You have to cry and then repent of your sins and accept him in your heart. And now you're filled with the Holy Spirit and you'll go to heaven. That's exactly what you're doing with the borderline. There's no difference. That's why you have tears in your eyes as you swoop down from the heavens, pouring your love on them. It's absolute self-important grandiosity. He says, codependents are not exploitative. Absolutely they are. If you are in a relationship with a borderline or an NPD, it's because you have seen that they have weaknesses. You see that they are broken. You see that they've been damaged. And you know that that damage makes them potentially dependent on you. You want them to be dependent on you. That's why you want your love to be perfect, so that they will be dependent on you and you alone can be the one to save them. That is exploitation. You are exploiting their weakness. Whenever they love bomb you, now maybe consciously you're not aware of this, but when they love bomb you, they are coming from the broken, absolutely needy infant. You love it for all the reasons that you can understand, but you also love that they need you. And you sense that, and you exploit that. So this is, again, inverted narcissism. It doesn't matter to me whether you're a cluster B or not. You're still operating from that. And if you are somebody who's not cluster B, which in my definition means that when you're out of the craziness, you can maybe shake it off to an extent and get some sense of, get back to yourself again. We could even argue about that. But when you're in it, you are absolutely gone. You are not home. You are regressed in your narcissism. And functionally, there's no difference. There's no difference between a cluster B inverted narcissist and a codependent who is trapped in the cycle of their needing to take care of and be abused by somebody who can never love them. I don't see any difference. We might talk about degrees, but other than that, they're trapped. There's no way out. I mean, I could go right in here. There are comments of people who've been in and out of borderline relationships for 30 years. They get out of one, they find another one. I mean, I could read them. I mean, these are people who never leave their narcissism. They never leave. They never get a sense of who they are, ever. So I don't agree with this. I think this is an arbitrary distinction. I'm happy to say that as a codependent, I'm not cluster B. Not because I'm attached to it. If somebody can prove to me I'm cluster B, I'll accept it. But I see the difference between how my mind works in the borderline and the narcissist, and I'm happy to label that cluster B personality disorder and mine codependence. But we're still swimming in the same pool. I might be in the shallow end of the pool, but I'm still in the same pool as them. Until you get out of the pool, you're still a narcissist. That's how I look at it. So he says, codependents are not overly self-important, grandiose, exploitative, entitled, and lacking empathy. Now, all you have to do is read the comments on my videos, and you will find codependents who need codependents. Obviously, if you're on this channel, you've been discarded, most likely. They need to see the borderline as being evil. They need to talk about getting justice. They need to talk about how the borderline needs to be held accountable, that you can't just call it a mental illness and wipe it away, that there has to be some, there has to be some justice, there has to be some accountability. Anybody who talks like that does not have empathy. Because, the other side, the flip side of I'm the only one that can help them, I am God, I take on all of their abuse, but you won't stop me. You will soon bow to my unconditional love and you will be healed and love me back. That's narcissism. The opposite of that is you are evil, you're the worst, you are an evil, narcissistic, demonic, possessed person, you must be held accountable. That's the flip side of the same coin. Love and hate are not opposites. Hate is the flip side of love. The opposite of love is apathy. If you hate what has been done, if you have anger and resentment, it means you still love them. So that's why I say to anybody who says that, I say you unconsciously still want them to love you because your need to see them as evil means that they're rational. Because if somebody is broken, if somebody has a mental illness, we don't judge them. We go, oh, they're broken, they're irrational. They have a mental illness. They can't help it. It's what the actions they do are evil and destructive and horrible, but they themselves are they're broken. That's empathy. That's true empathy. But if you look at them and you say they're evil, they manipulate, they did it on purpose, they did it to harm me, whether they did or not is irrelevant. Your need to judge them is your narcissism, your lack of empathy. That is your psychopathy. And you need to defend that because that, on the one hand, makes you feel superior to them, which is your narcissism. It's a defense mechanism. Now you know exactly why narcissists do what they do. They did it for that same reason. And at the same time, it keeps the hope alive because if you were to let go of that pain and forgive them, the only way you could possibly forgive them is to see that they have a mental illness Not, you wouldn't be sweeping what they did under the rug. In fact, you would be looking at it more and more. It would become more and more horrific what they did. And at the same time, you would go, and of course they did that, based on, how they grew up. Everybody would do that. I have nothing but empathy for that person. But I'm sure as hell not going to swim in that shark tank again. That's empathy. Empathy isn't making excuses for them and continuing to love them and feel guilty about leaving them. That's not empathy. That's, again, your unconscious narcissism wanting them to love you. So I disagree with all of that. What else? All right, so again, going back in time, I'm going back in time. So he says, in response to BPD, NPD, the super empath inverted narcissist connection, he says, super empaths are codependents in denial. I'm okay with that. Their coping mechanism is a need to feel superior to those who abuse them. I am in full agreement with that. When in reality, they need to learn to forgive the narcissist or borderline, let them go with their blessing, and take steps to be free of a codependent mental and emotional stronghold. Once again, I'm in full agreement with all of that so far. He says something about, anyway, he gives me a compliment, which, anyway, I'll repeat it just so I can give the full thing. He says, I'm impressed how you try to understand and interpret the whole supernova twin flame nonsense in a very respectful and self-controlled manner. You're very balanced, articulated, etc., etc. Okay, so that's very nice. So I said to him, I said, are you aware that you just described a very narcissistic person? Quote, their coping mechanism is to feel superior. I said, that's an NPD trait. To which he responds, I think the supposed super empath you're quoting could very well be exhibiting the effects of narcissistic injury, as they don't come across as very empathic and have created a nonsensical philosophy to feel superior to the abuser. The difference with a person who's pathological is that they are dismissive by nature all of the time in order to preserve the false self. Whereas a codependent may attempt to dismiss the abusive person in order to limit the pain of rejection and a broken heart. It would be like a punished crying child saying he hates his dad for disciplining him when in reality he doesn't know how to process the emotion he's experiencing. After a time to heal, they understand more clearly, but someone who's pathological is incapable of ever understanding unless they flee the false self as a result of mortification. So there's an assumption there. So he's actually, as I'm reading it, he is describing exactly what I see narcissists and borderlines do. For me, the only difference between the narcissist, the borderline, and myself is just gradations. I'm a little bit further enough away that I'm not as pathologically, as he puts it, I'm not as pathological. I have more object constancy. I have more internal object constancy within myself. But again, I've seen codependents be so injured, as he put it, their narcissistic injury. I've seen them so injured for so long that they become functional NPDs. In fact, I see no difference. Ultimately, I don't see the difference. And I certainly keep running into codependents who are absolutely committed to defending their judgment and psychopathy. They really cannot tolerate when I say, you are not a victim. You chose to do this. Not only did you choose to be in this relationship, but you sought it out. You spent years hunting for this narcissist or for this borderline, to which they will erupt and say, how? You don't understand. They caught me by surprise. They manipulated me. They played me for so long. I'm just a poor victim. I stepped into a bear trap. So I'm here to say that if you are a codependent might as well be a personality disorder because it's created in the same way. And it is something that doesn't go away. I would even say it gets worse with time. And, you can say, yeah, for my first 20 or 30 years, et cetera, and then I met my girlfriend, my now ex-wife, or whatever it was. And then for 20 years this, and then we had a kid, and then she this, and then she that, and then, I could read one here. If I can find it within a couple of seconds, I'll read it. But there's just no shortage of borderline codependents who spend decades in multiple relationships. Here's one. Once upon a time, I acquired a classic borderline girlfriend and spent 10 years with her. So that's 10 years. That's 10 years of love bombing and devaluation and cheating on you, devaluing you, ghosting you, slashing your tires, whatever it is that they did. That's 10 years of that. So this is somebody who was incapable of getting out for 10 years. You might as well have a personality disorder. You might as well have a personality disorder of hitting yourself in the head with a hammer every time you hear classical music. Yes, it's this personality disorder that you can't play classical music around because they pick up and hit themselves. In fact, they carry a hammer around in their back pocket just in case somebody has classical music. It might as well be. The cognitive dissonance is just another way of saying the lack of ability to resist the impulse to keep making yourself available to somebody who keeps abusing you and harming you. It might as well be. There's no functional difference in my mind. We can then split hairs about what they do differently. And again, I'm happy to hold on to the idea that codependents, if they don't have a personality disorder, if they're not covert narcissists, have more of an ability to self-analyze. But what difference does it make if you can't stop yourself from being, people that cut themselves? What's the difference? There is no difference. We blame the other person, but the only real thing that we can point to in our lives as codependents where we're victims is when we were kids, when we were infants, and we were programmed to accept love transactionally. That we didn't have any control over. But once you become an adult, you are now responsible for that programming. You have 100% responsibility. People on here say it all the time, and rightly so. The borderline has a mental illness, but they have to be held accountable. Now, that's true. The universe and society will not let you get away with not taking responsibility for the pain that you cause other people. The fact that you have a personality disorder that makes it virtually impossible for you to resist your impulses is irrelevant. The world doesn't care. People don't care. Reality doesn't care. Same is true with the codependent. So we're going to have a different value over the codependent. Well, I'm not really sick. It's just that you don't understand. They did it to me. No, man. People who aren't codependent see it coming. Not only do they see it coming, but the narcissist and the borderline can also smell that you're not somebody. In their perspective, they're not attracted to you, but their mental illness goes, no, that's not a victim. Let's stay away from that one. Like, I'm not attracted to NPDs. I can see them coming a mile away. They're not attracted to me because they can see that I see them coming a mile away. The cute, sexy, borderline woman who is what I'm talking about. That's my kryptonite. I have they find me and I find them. And I have to keep doing the work to make sure that I don't dive into that pool with them. So the idea that, okay, let me see if I can go back to what the other person said. So the idea that the codependent, let's see if I can remember. The idea that after a time to heal, the codependent understands more clearly than the pathological, psychopath. That the pathological psychopath when they split, they're not able to heal and then understand more clearly. So he's trying to make the argument that the codependent is not pathological. The codependent is not psychopathic. The codependent after the assumption is that if you're away from the borderline or the narcissist long enough, you'll be able to heal and come back to some kind of sane functioning. And I completely disagree with that. My experience is that when I was, after I got out of my relationship with my borderline ex, time was making it worse. And I could feel that I was not functioning. Now, I've been in group therapy. I've been in therapy for 25, 30 years, something like that. I've been in 12-step work for almost 40 years. So I know what it's like to live in a sane way and an insane way. And I could feel that I was insane and I couldn't bring myself out of it. Time wasn't helping. Time didn't help this other person. So the assumption that this person is giving me is that after a time to heal, they understand more clearly. Meaning after a time to heal, they stop being pathological. They stop being narcissistic. They stop being insane. Because we're not insane. We're different than them. And yet, here's this person who is very similar to many people that I run into all the time. Once upon a time, I acquired a classic borderline girlfriend and spent 10 years with her. It's taken me a lifetime to figure all this out. After many years in therapy myself, I acquired a new girlfriend, which was a quiet borderline. What the fuck? I thought I was making progress after a 14-year on and off again relationship. So based on that, the second relationship was longer than the first after he went to therapy. So you're telling me that this non-cluster B, because I'm happy to accept this person as a codependent and not a cluster B, you're telling me this codependent non-cluster B, if you just get him away from the borderline, he will shake it off and he'll heal and he'll be okay. And he even went to therapy. And then he found a borderline he was in an on again, off again relationship for 14 years. So you're trying to tell me that just because I don't have a personality disorder, that I can magically heal? Again, what I hear in this other guy's comment, again, very intelligent, very cooperative, very interesting, but I hear an emotional agenda. And what I hear is the emotional agenda is, I'm a codependent, I'm not a psychopath. Don't say that about me. In fact, I'm like this, I'm like this. In fact, it's like a little child. He gets hurt, he has narcissistic injury, but afterwards, give me some time, I'll be okay, and I don't have that problem. Don't tell me that I'm a psychopath. Don't call me a narcissist. Now, I'm not saying consciously he was doing that. Some people consciously get really bent out of shape and say that same thing, but I think the emotional agenda is the same. I don't have one about this. The more I look into it, the more that I look at myself, and the more that I listen to you people, the more that I realize that we're all in the same boat, that there's really no difference, that when the codependent is in their deal, they might as well be a covert narcissist. They might as well be an inverted narcissist. They might as well be full-blown NPD, because the stuff that you do is as crazy as anything else. Staying with somebody like that is as crazy as anything. It takes two to tango. And if you're going to sit here and judge the borderline and the narcissist as being evil and insane and psychopathic and pathological, and you're the one that's with them, you can't stimulate their pathology, their psychopathy, unless you yourself are at that level. Like they say, it takes two to tango. But you get to hide behind the mask of rationality and the mask of I'm the victim. And I've been there. And I can sit here and say, I know how horrific the abuse is. I can't even imagine anything more horrific. I'm being straight. I can't imagine a more horrific experience than the one I experienced with my borderline girlfriend. And that's after growing up in an alcoholic, family as a kid. That was worse was more concentrated and worse than anything I've ever experienced in my life. And the way that my borderline ex, the way that her mental illness set me up and planned out my ultimate demise and devaluation and destruction was more painful than even the death of my fiance that passed away. It was even more painful than that. A different kind of pain. Don't get me wrong. It's a really horrific pain, but it's a different kind of pain. At least, when a loved one dies, even if it's your soulmate and they die, as horrible as it is, there's some rationality to it. There's some understanding, even in the stuff you don't understand. But the pain that the borderline and the narcissist do accomplish in you is there's no universe where there's any sense of any rationality, and that makes it worse. I can say all of that, and at the same time, I can sit with you and empathize with you in your victimhood, and at the same time say you're not a victim. And if you stayed for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, it was your choice based on your might as well have been personality disorder. What else do you call it other than insanity? Insanity is, among other things, not being able to see objective reality. Have an objective reality check within yourself and with everything around you. Cognitive dissonance, you might as well just call that being insane. That's what cognitive dissonance is. It's the worst kind of insane. We might even say that the codependent knows they're crazy and can't get out of it, whereas the borderline and the narcissist, maybe they don't know they're crazy. Which is worse? I don't know. All right, so I think I've made my point here. It doesn't look like, wow, there's no comments here. Let me refresh that. Of course, it's the middle of the night for everybody. I am happy to take questions, but I'm happy to not take any at all because I know that the rest of the world is asleep. So, Gary Stafford question, can I be recovered and still love my BPD-X, or is recovery only achieved with I am apathetic towards her? Well, it depends on what you mean by love. Do you mean in love? I'm assuming you mean being in love with your borderline. So first off, let's not go into a state of judgment about your state of being. The term recovered, people in 12-step work don't use that word, which is one of the reasons I recommend people go to 12-step. So again, the three things everybody needs is therapy. If you want to recover, if you want what I have, you got to do what I did, and this is it. Therapy, CODA, working, not just going to CODA, but working the 12 steps of CODA, and then doing daily meditation. These are the three things that you need if you want to achieve what I've achieved. That's how I did it. So I don't use the word recovered because that's, again, if we're talking about transactional love is about being perfect. I don't need to be perfect. I don't want to be perfect. I want to stay imperfect because if I accept myself and my imperfections, I'm in a state of self-love. And I'm also in a state of acceptance, accepting, that's what the borderline can't do. They can't accept you as being perfect and imperfect at the same time. You're one or the other. But love is seeing that, yeah, you have that problem, but I still love you anyway. And I kind of love you because of it, even though I know it's not perfect about you. I don't like it when you do it, but, when I think about it, it's one of the things I miss about you is when you're not around. That's a healthy person. So we need to do that for ourselves. Can you be recovered and still love your BPD? You can still be in recovery and love your borderline ex. Does that mean that I think that you have completely healed from that relationship? I would guess. I can't climb inside your skin, but if you're saying you're still in love, if that's what you mean, it means that part of you is still waiting for your borderline ex to knock on the door and say, hey, I went to therapy. I realize now I've got this mental illness, and I'm totally so sorry, but now I know how to do it, and I'll never hurt you again. If that's the feeling you have, it means you take them back. Because you still want that to be true. As I was just thinking about that, when it comes to my borderline ex, I keep looking over here because oh, I guess I can show it to you. This was my fiance who passed away. That's her and me. 6 years ago. Wow. And so when I think of my borderline ex, I don't think of, there isn't a part of me that's expecting to hear from her. There isn't a part of me that, I don't have any negative feelings towards her, but I also don't have any love or what's she doing, or, I don't have any of that wanting to get back together. I don't look back at the good times and want to relive it or go back to it. I don't want to not forget it. It's not painful. It's neither. I'm apathetic, as you pointed out. My fiance, that's different. I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for her to knock on the door. I'm still waiting for her to call me. I'm still waiting to see her on the street. I'm still in love with her. I will be till I die. Even if I marry somebody else, I'll still be in love with her too. That's different. If you're feeling like that about your borderline ex, then you're not healed. So you're not fully healed yet, but you are in recovery. If you're doing the 3 things, you're in therapy, you're working the 12 steps, especially the 4th step, and you're doing daily meditation. If you're doing all that, then you are in recovery and you are making progress. And that's all that matters. That's all that matters, is making progress. So you are making progress, you are recovering, and you still love your BPDX. And as you continue to do the work, that will change. And you will come to a point eventually, if you do enough work, it may take you longer than it took me, but if you do the work, you'll eventually get to the place where you can look back on it with no regret, with no anger, and you won't feel in love with them anymore. But you'll have nothing but love and compassion for them. All right, what else? Michael Beck, question. I printed off everything for the CODA 12-step program, and Thursday evening will be my first meeting. What can I expect there? I have no idea. Listen, it's not a, first of all, congratulations and good for you. I'm glad you did that. That's, again, I don't personally need anybody to do anything, but that's what worked for me. So that's all I know. I know for a fact that works. And again, if I had to pick one of the 3, I'd pick CODA. If you do the steps, if you do the 12 steps. 12 steps has been absolutely revolutionary over the past 100 years almost in psychology and therapy. I mean, therapy was really changed as a result of the 12 steps. They're absolutely the most powerful therapeutic way to change your brain chemistry. Behavioral therapy, it's the best there is, in my experience. It's not the only thing. I also need normal therapy myself. But what can you expect? I don't know. Every meeting's different. And it's not a quiz. What's probably going to happen is you'll hear people talk about, each program is different. They'll talk about codependence, and they'll read from some literature, which will probably have people's experiences. And then they'll probably open it up for sharing, or there'll be a speaker, somebody who shares about, what they went through, and all of that good stuff. But you don't need to do anything. At some point, I would raise my hand and say, I'm looking for somebody to sponsor me through the 12 steps, because that's what it's all about. Now, my experience with some programs like CODA and Al-Anon, sometimes they'll kind of say, well, come to a few meetings. I mean, I don't know why they're like that. I don't know why they don't rush in to say, great, let's get started on the steps. But sometimes they'll be like that. But my suggestion to you is to get into the 12 steps as soon as possible. Find somebody who will walk you through the 12 steps. That's what a sponsor is. A sponsor is not a therapist. They're not a friend. They might take on a role like that, but a true sponsor is somebody who walks you through the 12 steps. And that's, in my experience, what you need straight off the bat. The other thing that you will get from meetings is a group of people who have similar experiences, so that when you're feeling crazy, you can call or text or, email, somebody or your sponsor and say, yeah, I was thinking about my borderline ex, and she sent me a text and I don't know what to do. And, and then they'll listen to you. And just having somebody who knows listen to you, give you some advice on what to do next. Because sometimes you don't know, what do I do next? And they'll say, get up, go take a shower, brush your teeth, go to work, and then call me when you get to work. Just so that you just do the next thing, what's in front of you, and you don't act on the impulse. So those are some things you can expect. But I don't know exactly what's going to happen in your first meeting. Every meeting is different. But again, my suggestion is that when it's appropriate, to raise your little virtual hand and ask for somebody to sponsor you through the 12 steps. And if you can tell them that you were directed to do that by somebody, so much the better. If you want to. You don't have to, but you can if you want. All right, let's see. Gary says, I still feel love for her, but I know that love can never be acted upon because it's pointless. I'm apathetic towards her actions. So you mean you're still in love with her? That's different. I feel love for my borderline ex. In fact, I would say I might even feel more love because it's more without expectation and unconditional. I don't need anything from her. I have no agenda with her. So much so that I don't even reach out to see where she's at or what's going on with her. That's not healthy for me or for her. But in terms of her, I have nothing but love. I have zero negative feeling. But your desire to love, your desire that says you love her, meaning you want her to love you back, that kind of love. You love her, meaning you want to hug her, you want to hold her hand, you want to look in her eyes, you want her to hug you and kiss you and look in your eyes and be there for you. You have an agenda. And that's what love is. When you're in love with somebody, you have an agenda. That's not a judgment, it's just a fact. I would love to be in that position again, but you want to be with somebody who also has that ability and that feeling towards you. You're all by yourself in this. This love that you have for her, it's all by yourself. That's the narcissism. Because this feeling of love you have for her is not given back to you. It's never been given back to you. So you say, I know that love can never be acted upon. That's meaningless. That feeling, that knowledge, that intellectual knowledge will not prevent you from acting on it if she knocked on your door right now. Right? Let's be honest. She knocks on your door in a teddy with a little teddy bear and a bottle of wine and a glint in her eye and a card that says, I'm sorry. That knowledge of you can't act on it's not going to stop anything. You and I both know that. So let's stop bullshitting ourselves. Now, you can have this feeling of knowing that you're still in love with her and you still want to be with her and you know that you have this impulse that you wouldn't be able to reject. You can have that feeling and still be acting contrary to that. You can still be doing what you need to do, especially if you're doing those three things. You text your sponsor, you call your sponsor, and you say, yep, I'm still thinking about her. I thought about her today. And then he'll talk to you or, in whatever way that they're going to want to talk to you, and let's work on the next step together or whatever it is. You can be in that place of everything in you wants to take that action, but you don't. So this, what I'm pointing out as bullshit is that you're telling yourself in this that you're not going to act on it. That's really the message you want to tell me is, I still feel love for her, but I know that love can never be acted upon because it's pointless. You're trying to tell me that you have the ability to keep yourself from acting on that, and I don't believe that. I would feel more comfortable with you not acting on it if you said, I still feel love for her, and I also still feel like I can't resist her. If she walked through the door, I wouldn't be able to resist her. I would feel more comfortable because you would be conscious of your impulses and you would know that you were powerless. But the fact that you think you have some power that you can intellectually tell yourself that you know you can't act on it even though you still love her, that's called cognitive dissonance. Right there, that's cognitive dissonance. So you're still in love with her. That's okay. You're still attached to her. That's okay. Do the work. It's not about being perfect. It's not about feeling perfect. The only thing that you have control over is what you do. And even then, that control is very limited. So the control that you have right now is to get honest over this nonsense that you think you have control over your actions. You know if she came back, you wouldn't be able to stop yourself. And then with that knowledge, you're going to do the opposite. You're going to call your therapist. You're going to go to your CODA meetings. You're going to meditate. You're going to watch this channel. You keep doing the opposite actions, and then eventually your feelings will change. We like to have our feelings, be what we want. And people ask me, when am I going to stop being in pain? When am I going to stop? Well, I don't know. It doesn't matter that you're in pain. I mean, I feel for you, but that's not the point. You want the feelings to go away. You think if the feelings go away, then your actions will change. But the truth is, this kind of what you're doing right now, this kind of intellectual, nonsense you're telling yourself of, but I know I can never act on it. That's a way that your unconscious mind sets you up to actually do the opposite. Because when you think that you have control over your actions, then you're going to find yourself going, yeah, I can go check her Facebook status. I mean, I could give her a call. I mean, I know I'll never act on it. So, I mean, I wonder who she's with right now. And then before you know it, this snowballs and you're out of control. Or she, God forbid, she texts you or finds a way to text you. Hopefully you've blocked all contact. And then you tell yourself, well, yeah, I mean, I can respond. I mean, we're not going to get back together or anything. And I mean, I can get away with that, and I'll be all right because I know, even though I still love her, I know and then before you know it, you'll be right back where you were. She'll tell you, I'm going to therapy, or I'm going to go to therapy. And you see, oh, she's going to go to therapy. It'll all be okay. So you're still in love, my friend. You're still attached. That's okay. You need to do the work. If you keep doing the work, you'll eventually get to that place where you will feel unattached, as you put it very well, apathetic, unconditional love for her. You'll have the kind of love where you really don't care and you're not in love with her anymore and you don't want to be with her, and the thought of it is neither here nor there. Okay? All right. So that's it for everybody. Again, if you're new to the channel, click the join button at the super empath level or above. You'll get access to private videos, and I'll tell you all kinds of stuff about how I did this and what you can do to heal yourself. Of course, subscribe and hit the bell button and smash the like button. That's good for this channel. And all of these other links up here you can check out, which has to do with helping you find your true path in life. I won't go into it because it's a different channel with a different emphasis, but that's there for you as well if you want to make use of it. So that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much for staying up with me and or waking up or whatever. And I will see you guys when I see you. Let me see. What am I looking for? I am looking for this. All right. I'll see you guys soon. Take care.